think of all the brilliant things to come from Liverpool. There's the music and the football, Tom Baker, moustaches, and of course the Range Rover Evoque.
In the same way that Liverpool has reinvented itself recently as a cool and stylish city, the Range Rover Evoque has really redefined the very small SUV segment, much in the same way that the Freelander and Freelander 2 did for Land Rover over a decade ago. It's a very good looking car, it's angular and futuristic, and a real advance in small models from Land Rover. Prices range from £28,000 up to £40,000, and there are 3-door coupe and 5-door models available.
Despite its challenging looks and its Victoria Beckham design, the Evoque is after all a lot more yummy mummy than muddy farmer. The Evoque is still a pretty formidable off-road vehicle.
It is based on the Freelander after all. That means all manner of electronic driving aids like all-terrain response, descent control and hill start in 4x4 models to keep you on the straight and narrow.
Rather controversially, however, the Evoque is available in two-wheel drive format. Now, while that may dismay purists, I think that makes perfect sense for fleet drivers, company car drivers, and people who are worried about their emissions. In two-wheel drive diesel engine format, the Evoque can manage as little as 129 grams per kilometre of CO2, which is very, very low for the segment. Now, what that means if you're a company car driver is potentially low benefit in kind company car tax, and if you're a private buyer, low road tax on an annual basis. If you're just counting the pennies, then you can get over 50 mpg combined with turbo diesel engines, which is again very impressive for a car in this sector.
Engine choices include a 2.2 litre turbo diesel engine that comes in two guises, 150 brake horsepower or 190 brake horsepower. There's also a 2 litre petrol engine. In terms of transmissions, there's a 6-speed manual and 6-speed automatic gearbox. Now, normally I prefer a stick shifter manual box, but I think with the Evoque it might suit an automatic better. Do bear in mind though that with an automatic you will lose out in terms of fuel economy, which means more visits to the pump and more overall cost. As for the interior, well, I'm not quite as knocked out by the Evoque as I am by the Range Rover and Range Rover Sport. However, the Evoque is noticeably much better than the Freelander, which is very utilitarian.
While the Evoque isn't quite as long as the Freelander, it's a little bit wider. So what you get is plenty of space in the cabin for binnacles. So you've got a nice big glove box here with plenty of aux jacks and USB jacks and power sockets. You've got another one here with your cup holders. You can have your phone in here. There's a couple in these doors as well. So there's lots of space for oddments, as we call them in the car industry. Your phone, your drinks, your wallet and things like that. Of course, keep a hold of your keys because it's start-stop in here. You don't need to put the key in to start it.
Boot space in the back is between 550 litres and 575 litres depending on the 3 or 5 door models. It goes up to a maximum of 1445 litres with the rear seats folded down in the 5 door model. Due to the way the Evoque is styled, legroom in the back is a little bit pushed, and on 3 door models entry to the rear is particularly awkward. However, the compact dimensions do mean the Evoque is easier to park, and gadgets like parking sensors will help where that's concerned.
So while the Evoque is essentially a bit of a posh car, it's at heart a Land Rover, which means it's very good off-road. And while you haven't got the rotary dial here to select different modes, you have got these rocker switches which allow you to select between various off-road modes. So you've got a normal mode obviously for just driving around the roads. You've got grass, gravel and snow. I think that's going to be particularly handy in wintry weather. You can go off-road down rutted roads, and you can also travel on sand. There's also descent control in the Evoque, which means you can very slowly move down very steep inclines. In terms of driving, I've spoken a little bit already about what it's like to drive the Evoque, but there's 2 buttons down here I want to point out, one of which is an eco button. Now what that means is that you can drive the Evoque as frugally as you possibly can. to get that 50 miles per gallon plus fuel economy, which is particularly good in a car like this. The other end of the spectrum, what you can do is switch off ESP, and what that'll do is make the car basically a lot more interesting to drive. Although we're in a turbo diesel, the Evoque is really quiet when you're driving. Now that's partly because we're driving on the motorway, but it's partly because there's a lot more insulation between the cabin and the engine bay. Now there is some road noise, but that's largely due to the noise from the tyres and these particularly big wing mirrors. Now we've been out on some back roads this morning in the Evoque, and it's a really slingable car. You can have a lot of fun with it. The traction is very impressive and there's not a lot of body roll. But the suspension is quite firm, and over unsettled grounds, unsettled roads, that's really going to tell. Now driving around the city might be a different matter, but essentially the Evoque isn't the most comfortable car on the roads.
The Range Rover Evoque is well spec'd at all levels, but this is a car that can get very expensive at higher specifications. Selecting a 4-wheel drive model, a diesel engine, an automatic gearbox and a high specification will mean that your Evoque nudges £40,000, well into 7-seat Land Rover Discovery territory. It also puts the Evoque well ahead of potential competitors such as the Mini Countryman, Audi Q3 and BMW's X1 and X3 in terms of pricing because of that high specification.
However, exclusivity is kind of the point with Range Rover models, and even on higher spec Evoques with steep asking prices, there's a very, very long waiting list to buy one of these cars, to the point where if I wanted to buy one now in April 2012, I'd have to wait till 2013 until I got my hands on one. So, good news for Range Rover then, and good news for Victoria Beckham and the UK car industry, and also good news for Liverpool.